In the days when the iron hand of the Philistines weighed heavy upon the neck of Israel, when their lord sat in opulent halls boasting of victories over the Hebrews, and the children of God cowered in fields that no longer bore them sustenance without tribute, there dwelt in the territory of Dan a man named Manoah and his wife, a woman of deep sorrow. For though her heart longed for a child, her womb had remained barren through the long years of her marriage. Each evening she would stand upon the rocky heights, gazing toward the west where the sun bled crimson over the land of the Philistines, and she would whisper prayers to the God of her fathers. Silent petitions carried on the wind, though no answer seemed to come. But one day, as she went alone to the vineyard beyond the village, where the earth smelled of spring and the fig trees hung with the promise of fruit, the air suddenly grew still, unnaturally still, as though creation itself held its breath. Then, before her eyes, a figure appeared, a man, yet not a man, radiant as the dawn, his countenance shining like burnished bronze, his robe white as lightning, and in his hand a staff that seemed to pulse with living fire. She fell to her knees, trembling, for she knew no mortal could bear such a presence. "Woman," the angel spoke, his voice like the rolling of distant thunder and the whisper of a gentle breeze intertwined. "Though you are barren and have borne no child, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware. Drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb. No razor shall touch his head, for he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." Her heart pounded as she listened, every word sinking into her like rain upon parched ground. She tried to speak, but no words came, only tears streaming down her face as the angel's radiance faded, leaving behind the warm breath of spring and the distant song of doves. She ran to Manoah, breathless, her eyes alight with a fire he had never seen. "A man of God came to me," she exclaimed, her voice trembling, "and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. He told me I shall bear a son, and that he shall be consecrated to the Lord from birth." Manoah, though a man of faith, was struck with awe and fear. "Let the Lord's word be sure," he prayed that night beneath the stars, his hands lifted toward the heavens. "But, O God, send the man of God to us again, that we may learn what to do for the child who will be born." And God heard him. Days later, as the woman again walked in the fields, the angel returned, and she ran to fetch her husband. Manoah came, breathless, and when he saw the angel, he too fell to the earth. "Are you the one who spoke to my wife?" he asked. "I am," came the answer, firm as stone yet gentle as water. Manoah pleaded, "Tell us how we are to raise the boy, that we may do all that is required." The angel spoke of the vow, the consecration, the holiness required, and when Manoah, still fearful, offered to prepare a meal for the visitor, the angel refused. "If you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Then Manoah, sensing something divine, asked, "What is your name, that when your words come true we may honor you?" The angel smiled, and the light of eternity flashed in his eyes. "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" With that, Manoah built an altar, and as the flame rose upon it, the angel stepped into the fire and ascended toward heaven in the smoke and flame, leaving Manoah and his wife on their faces in awe and terror. "We shall surely die," Manoah cried, "for we have seen God." But his wife, her faith unshaken, whispered, "If the Lord meant to kill us, he would not have accepted our offering, nor would he have told us these things." In time, as promised, she bore a son and named him Samson, and as the boy grew, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in the camps of Dan, a whisper of power to come, a storm not yet unleashed. Years later, when Samson had become a towering young man of unmatched strength, his heart was seized not by battle but by beauty. For in the Philistine city of Timnah he beheld a woman whose laughter danced like wind through reeds, and whose eyes held the fire of temptation. And though his parents pleaded, "She is not of our people. Seek a wife among Israel," he defied them, saying, "Get her for me, for she pleases me," thus beginning a path where desire would clash with the purpose Yahawah had set for him. At his wedding feast, amidst flowing wine and mocking Philistine nobles, Samson's pride flared as he posed a riddle born of his secret victory over the lion. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. But when the Philistines, unable to solve it, threatened his bride's family, she wept and clung to him, coaxing the answer from his lips. And when his enemies returned with the solution, his fury ignited like dry tinder, for he knew she had betrayed him. Storming from the feast, he slew 30 Philistines to pay the wager, but when he returned for his wife, he found her given to another man, and grief twisted into vengeance. He caught 300 foxes, tied torches to their tails, and released them into Philistine fields, turning their harvest into an inferno, the flames devouring vineyards and olive groves as he watched from the hills, jaw clenched, the night sky glowing red with ruin. And in that moment, the man who had been chosen to deliver Israel stood at the crossroads of love and war, his destiny now bound to bloodshed. The sun burned low over the hills of Judah, staining the sky with the color of blood, as news of Samson's fiery revenge on the Philistines swept through the land like a wind before a storm. And the Philistine lords, humiliated and enraged by the destruction of their fields and vineyards, gathered their warriors in iron ranks and marched on Judah with a singular demand: "Deliver us the one who has defied us, or we will burn your land and slaughter your people." Fear gripped the hearts of the men of Judah, for they had long grown accustomed to living under the yoke of their enemies, resigned to servitude and tribute. And when the Philistine host encamped at Lehi, bristling with spears and shields, they saw no hope but to betray their own deliverer. So 3,000 men of Judah went up to the rocky stronghold of Etam, where Samson hid, and in the dim shadows of the cleft they stood before him, nervous, ashamed, and trembling. "Do you not know," they pleaded, their voices laced with desperation, "that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you have done to bring their wrath upon us?" Samson's eyes, dark as a storm about to break, burned with a fury that was both righteous and dangerous, and his reply cut like iron: "As they did to me, so I have done to them." But the men of Judah would not relent. They had come to save their own skins, not to honor Yahawah's deliverer. And they said, "We have come to bind you and hand you over to them." For a moment silence hung heavy as the weight of betrayal sank deep into Samson's chest. These were his own people, the ones he fought to free, yet they would rather appease their oppressors than stand beside him. Slowly, with a voice low but filled with restrained power, he said, "Swear to me that you yourselves will not kill me." And they swore, binding him with 2 new ropes, their hands trembling as they tied the cords around his arms, as though they feared what might come if he broke free. When they brought him down to Lehi, the Philistine camp erupted in triumphant laughter. Here was the mighty Samson, bound and helpless, delivered by the very people he sought to save. Drums beat, voices jeered, swords clanged on shields in mockery as they surrounded him, eager to spill his blood and parade his corpse before their gods. But in that moment, as they closed in, the air itself seemed to tremble, and suddenly the spirit of Yahawah rushed upon Samson like a consuming fire. His muscles swelled with divine strength, his heart thundered like the roar of lions, and the ropes binding his arms burned away as if licked by invisible flames. terror flashed across Philistine faces as the man they thought conquered burst forth like an unleashed tempest. His eyes blazed, his roar split the sky, and snatching up the fresh jawbone of a donkey from the ground, he became destruction incarnate. He struck with supernatural fury, each blow cracking skulls and shattering bone, the ground shaking beneath the weight of his onslaught. Men fell in heaps, screaming, clawing at the earth as they died. Shields splintered, swords flew from hands, and soon the valley was a charnel house, red with blood, littered with corpses piled high like waves on a stormy sea. The Philistine army broke, but Samson did not stop. He pursued them, driven by the fire of vengeance, until 1,000 men lay dead, their bodies silent testimony to the wrath of Yahawah, channeled through one chosen judge. When at last the killing ceased, Samson stood alone amid the carnage, his chest heaving, his skin streaked with blood, his hand still clutching the gore-soaked jawbone. Raising it high, he cried out, his voice echoing across the hills, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men." His triumph was undeniable, yet as the adrenaline ebbed, so too did his strength, and he sank to his knees, parched, trembling, the weight of mortality pressing upon him. "O Yahawah," he gasped, his voice cracking with desperation, "you have granted this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. Will you now let me die of thirst and deliver me into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And Yahawah, who is faithful even when his people falter, split open the hollow ground at Lehi, and water burst forth cool and clear. Samson drank deep, the life returning to his limbs, but as he stared at the stream, a sobering truth settled on him. All his might was nothing without the spirit of Yahawah. Yet even then, pride coiled quietly within his heart. For though he had seen the source of his strength, he still thought himself invincible. Thus the judge of Israel rose once more, a hero to his people, a terror to his foes, and a man walking a narrow path between glory and ruin, his fate already written in the designs of the Almighty. Years passed, and Samson, the judge whose name was spoken with both awe and dread, continued to strike terror into the Philistines, burning their fields, slaughtering their warriors, and humiliating their rulers at every turn. Yet, with every victory, pride gnawed deeper at his soul, and though his strength was divine, his heart grew reckless, seeking pleasure more than purpose. Until one fateful day, in the lush valley of Sorek, he met Delilah, a woman of mesmerizing beauty, whose eyes glimmered like moonlight on still water, whose voice flowed like honey over stone, and whose smile concealed the serpent's fangs beneath. To Samson, she was a respite from battle, a softness to drown his restless spirit, but to the Philistine lords, the key to his undoing, and they came to her in secret, promising silver beyond measure, if she would uncover the secret of his strength. Delilah began her subtle work, coaxing Samson with tender words, feigning love while planting seeds of betrayal. "Tell me, I pray you," she whispered one night, her fingers tracing the scars on his chest. "Where does your great strength lie, and how might you be bound?" At first, Samson toyed with her, weaving lies into his answers. "Bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, and I shall be weak," he said. And when the Philistines rushed in as she tested his words, he snapped the cords like threads of cobwebs, leaving them fleeing in terror. Again she tried, binding him with new ropes, weaving his hair into a loom, each time crying, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson!" And each time he rose, unbroken, laughing at their futility. Yet though he laughed, a dangerous complacency crept in. His heart, blinded by lust, could not see the trap closing around him. Night after night, Delilah pressed harder, her tone shifting from playful to wounded, her words cutting deeper than any sword. "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times." And Samson, weary of her endless pleading, of the constant gnawing at his resolve, finally broke beneath her persistence, revealing the truth he had never spoken to another. "A razor has never touched my head," he confessed in the stillness of the night, his voice heavy with trust misplaced. "For I am a Nazirite to Yahawah from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall be weak like any other man." Delilah's eyes flashed with triumph, though she hid it behind tender caresses, lulling him into slumber upon her lap, and as he slept she summoned a man to shave the 7 locks of his hair. When the last strand fell, the spirit of Yahawah departed from him, and she cried one final time, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson!" But this time, when he awoke to fight, his arms felt like lead, his body like stone, and he could do nothing as they seized him, gouged out his eyes, and dragged him in chains to Gaza. There, in the darkness of blindness, grinding grain in the prison like an ox, Samson tasted the full bitterness of his folly. Yet even in disgrace, even in weakness, a whisper of hope stirred within him. For though man's strength fails, Yahawah's covenant endures, and the hair upon his head began slowly, silently to grow again. In the darkness of Gaza's prison, where rats scurried across damp stone and the air stank of sweat and despair, Samson, once the mighty terror of the Philistines, now blind and broken, toiled endlessly at the mill like a beast of burden, pushing the heavy grinding stone in endless circles as mocking voices of guards filled the chamber. "Where is your God now, mighty Samson?" And though his body was withered and his sight gone, deep within him a flame still smoldered, faint but unextinguished. And as the days turned to weeks and weeks to months, something unseen began to happen. His hair, the sign of his Nazirite vow, began to grow again, curling in tangled locks over his shoulders, and with it, a quiet stirring of the spirit he had once squandered. Then came the day of the great feast to Dagon, the Philistine god, when lords and rulers from every city gathered in the massive temple to offer sacrifices and revel in their triumph over Israel's champion, and in their arrogance they demanded that Samson be brought forth to entertain them, to be their living trophy of humiliation. A young boy led him by the hand into the colossal hall, where over 3,000 men and women crowded the balconies, laughter and jeers cascading down like a storm. "Play for us, blind fool! Show us your strength!" And in the center of that mockery, beneath the towering pillars that upheld the roof, Samson stood silently, his empty eyes lifted toward heaven, and for the first time in years, his heart was free of pride, free of self, and filled only with desperate faith. Leaning close to the boy who guided him, he whispered, "Lead me to the pillars that support the house, that I may lean on them." And when his hands touched the cool stone, he spread his arms wide, pressing against the massive supports, and prayed with a trembling voice, "O Yahawah, sovereign God of Israel, remember me, I pray thee. Strengthen me, I beg thee, only this once, that I may be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And as he spoke, the spirit of Yahawah surged within him one final time, filling his wasted frame with divine might. And with a deep breath, he braced himself, muscles straining, veins bulging, the pillars beginning to tremble under his force. Above, the revelry turned to panic as cracks spidered through the stone, screams rising in the air, but Samson did not falter, crying out with his last breath, "Let me die with the Philistines!" And with a roar that shook the heavens, he heaved with all the strength of his soul, and the pillars shattered, the roof collapsing in a deafening avalanche of stone and timber, crushing lords, warriors, and commoners alike beneath the ruins. The camera lingers on the chaos, dust and screams, then silence, as the temple of Dagon lies in ruins, and beneath the rubble, the body of Samson lies still, arms outstretched, as if in eternal embrace of sacrifice. Later, his family comes quietly, lifting his lifeless form from the debris and carrying him back to Israel. And as they walk into the fading light of dusk, the narrator's voice carries over the final image of the broken temple. And so, in death, he slew more than in life. A man of flaws and might, chosen from the womb, who through his final act fulfilled the purpose of Yahawah and delivered his people. His legacy not of pride, but of redemption through sacrifice.